Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Trollhunters Tales of Arcadia. Okay, so this episode of Night to Remember is, well, the title's a little bit ironic because, well, on the one hand, it does reference the fact that the Spring Fling Dance is kind of sort of happening in this episode, which is a bit of a thing that this is how our story arc has been building to. That's been a thing, but and we do finally get to, see the dance, but which is usually described as a night to remember, but it's also ironic because during the events of this episode, Barbara winds up having to lose her memories, and that's what I was talking about the last episode where I talked about how it's not really gonna matter in the long term in the short term what Barbara finds out, because ultimately she winds up losing her memories in this episode. But it does wind up becoming important. But it does wind up becoming important later down the road. But and it does eventually build. But it's not important-ish now. But in any case, the episode opens up with immediately where the last one left off, where Jim and Strickler and Barbara have since plowed a car into Troll Market, and everybody is obviously very visibly confused. Obviously everybody's confused as to why there's a human underneath in their humble little Troll Market. Because obviously are very untrusting, especially although considering the fact, even though they're troll hunter is human, I mean they're kind of a little bit worried because they obviously see that the troll hunter is with the humans, but they're also a little bit confused because they don't know why a human's there to begin with. But Jim, of course, is calling everybody for help and insists that they find Vendel and tell him what's going on. But as Barbara is slipping in and out of consciousness in the scene, and she sees Troll Market for the first time. She looks around. She's a little bit visibly confused, but she looks around and obviously sees all of the she obviously looks around and sees all the trolls and all the other things, and she's a little visibly confused. And of course, eventually Strickler gets out of the car, and everybody wants to skin him alive because he's a changeling. They're obviously not happy that he's there, and essentially attack him. But it's at this point where Vendel shows up and tells them not to do that because they would risk injuring Jim's mother. So he proceeds to come to Jim's aid, and Jim asks Vendel if there's anything he can do, and Vendel tells him that he can try his best. He understands that he understands binding spell, and that he'll need to undo it to help her out because agreeing with Jim's assessment that he needs to do that, but also tells her that is in fact her best bet. But also tells them that they need Strickler because obviously they need to treat him because obviously their wounds are connected, which means if Strickler is badly injured, then so is Barbara. So Ard then proceeds to very roughly pick up Strickler, which causes Barbara to cry out in pain a little bit because she got a little bit squished. But it's at this point where Blinky then proceeds to scoop her up in his arms and tell her that everything is going to be okay, and she does recognize his voice. She recognizes that she's talking to the quote unquote guidance counselor, and recognizes his voice and realizes that who she's talking to is is quote unquote Mr. Blinky. So but of course with that they then proceed to bring everybody to Vendel's workshop, and several hours pass. Eventually Strickler winds up getting patched up, but in the interim. But but eventually Vendel does come out after everybody spends several hours worrying, and he tells everybody that he has good news and bad news. The good news is that he thinks he can heal Barbara and fix the binding spell. The bad news is he doesn't know how to break the enchantment to do that. But of course Toby points out that somebody does. And proceeds to tell, and of course everybody proceeds to glare at Strickler, but Strickler then proceeds to hastily respond that he doesn't have the enchantment on him. He admits that he does know of it, but it's in the Book of Gahuel in his office. So they need to go find the Book of Gahuel and go get it. And of course Jim happy about and of course Stream is a little upset about the whole idea that they have to go into the school, but Toby is also visibly concerned that they have to go to the school, and of course Jim believes he's talking about Angor Rot initially, until Toby points out that no, actually he's talking about Coach Lawrence, who is currently patrolling the hallways for the spring fling and isn't particularly happy about people not being at the dance. So he's going a little bit psycho on them. And of course, Jim realizes that he forgot the spring fling was that night. But of course, Claire tells him that his mother is more important, that he needs to be here to take care of her, and also proceeds to point out that he's not worried, that obviously he shouldn't worry about it because it's just some stupid dance and that his mother comes first. But Jim responds, pointing out that yes, he understands it's just a stupid dance, but he was kind of looking forward to their stupid dance. And Claire just kind of blushes a little bit before telling him that he needs to be there for his mother, and proceeds to use her shadow staff and proceeds to take Toby with her so that they can go and find the Book of Gahuel. Meanwhile, Vendel insists that they move Barbara to the Heartstone and move Strickler to the stockades. And Strickler is obviously not happy about the fact that he has to be in the cage, asking if he's in fact redeemed himself. But of course, Blinky respond, pointing out that there's a phrase humans have learned that he's not even close to redeeming himself. At which point he's just left in a cage and just kind of left and abandoned. So they just leave him in the cage. But of course, it's at this point where Claire and Toby proceed to arrive in the school, and they start looking for the book the book of Gahuel. But they don't wind up in the right room right away, and realize that they need to find it. But mainly because they don't want to just immediately go to the office. They want to just kind of make sure that they throw Coach Lawrence off the trail, because honestly, they were just trying to get a general idea of where they're supposed to be. But of course, it's at this point where Toby kind of stumbles a little bit out of the portal, but also responds that was a bit of a rough landing. But he does point out that they do point out that they need to move quickly so that they can actually get in, get the spell that they need, and get out. And of course, they then proceed to start making their way into hallways, unaware that Angor Rot is actually secretly watching them. And he then proceeds to just kind of appear behind the window and then just disappear again. And he's just implied to be in the episode somewhere, so he just disappears. But of course they walk out into the hallway, and sure enough, they do see Coach Lawrence yelling at a couple who have broken away from the dance to kiss a little bit, and he immediately instructs them to go back to the dance. And Toby and Claire, realizing that is exactly what fate is going to await them if they get caught, immediately try to sneak past them, but Coach Lawrence immediately spots them and tries to chase after them to get them to come back to the dance. But of course Toby gets the brilliant idea that she should use her staff to teleport them directly to Strickler's office, and she does that. And Coach Lawrence is just left very confused because he chased them into the dead end and is confused that they're not there. But of course, with that, he then proceeds to go back on his patrol around the school to make sure that everybody's where they're supposed to be. At which point, everybody's transported to Strickler's office. Both of them are transported to Strickler's office, and they start looking around, trying to find the Book of Gahuel that they're looking for. And of course, Toby comments that he doesn't like being in the office because he's got bad memories of being in the office because of the Anstrom episode. But well, Claire just looks around at all the books that are sitting on his desk and other places, and does point out that he's got a lot of weird books, namely on medieval torture and other things like that. But he's got a lot of weird books in his collection. And eventually Toby does find what they're looking for, and they do eventually. And of course, since Toby admits he can't read Troll, but Claire can, he asks her to come and read it for him. And eventually, after skimming through the pages a little bit, she does eventually find the spell that they need, and are very visibly happy that they've got the spell that they need. But it's at this point where Coach Lawrence comes into Strickler's office and believes they're going around doing a romper room unsupervised because he believes they're lovers, which, you know, not true at all. But he does insist that they go back to the dance. But then he sees Claire's shell staff in his collapsed form in his hand, and he takes it from her, believing it's some sort of contraband and might be illegal. And it is also confused as to what it is, and they take advantage of the confusion to rip the spell book out, to rip the page out of the Book of Gahuel, and stick it in their pocket while Coach Lawrence is distracted. At which point he tells Toby and Claire that they're coming with him. And meanwhile, as they arrive Jim is watching his mother recover with Blinky. They sit down and he sits down. They're watching her recover in the Hearthstone, and he proceeds to and they do wonder what they're supposed to do. And of course Blinky tells him that the only way that even if he doesn't recover, that even if she doesn't really recover all that quickly, he does point out that it's ultimately going to be her bond with her son that is going to help her pull through. And of course Jim is just pointing out that he's just telling him that, but Blinky points out that yes, he partly is, but also admits that it's true because he spent some time as a human and he knows full well the bonds between people is the most important thing they have. So with that, he then proceeds to give them some space, and Jim proceeds to go up to Barbara, and he proceeds to tell her everything. And of course he proceeds to ask her how she's feeling first and foremost, but he then proceeds to tell her everything about some of the things that some of the weird events that have been going on with his life, about how he went on a quote unquote camping trip to find the first triumvic stone and got to his keep. And then also that the reason Steve crashed his Vespa in that one episode is because he got attacked by a killer vulture troll. And then also finally, that Blinky was actually the quote-unquote guidance counselor. Although Jim admits that he does in fact give him a lot of guidance. But of course Barbara admits that it's also much to take in. But also wonders why but also points out that it's not really fair to Jim, because she points out that it's obviously her job as the mother to protect him rather than the other way around. But and of course he points out that he didn't really want to worry her, pointing out that obviously he wanted to kind of keep this kind of secret world away from her, to keep her from, you know, worrying and worrying about him getting killed and all those other things. You know, things that a mother doesn't necessarily want to hear. Makes perfect sense. But she does point out that it's her job to worry, and just as his job to not get hurt. But he admits that he's not going to get her. And also proceeds to point out that he also feels like that being the troll hunter was what he was meant to do. He admits that he then proceeds to summon and desummon his armor to prove the point. But he admits that subconsciously, might I mention, but he does admit that it is in fact what he wants to do, but he believes that's what he's supposed to do with his life. But he also admits that he understands her worry and realizes that if he had told her earlier, she probably wouldn't be lying in a table in Troll Market being badly injured right now. So, but of course, as he proceeds to, you know, kind of deliver that sentiment, it's at this point where Vendel comes in and reveals that there's another complication. At which point he proceeds to go and confront Strickler, who doesn't want to undo the binding spell, and for good reason, as we find out. Strickler, of course, admits that he knows that undoing the binding spell is very important to Jim, but he also points out that he's looking out for his own self-interest, because as he points out, both first and foremost, he does very much care about Jim's mother, although Jim interrupts him when he tells him that he thinks he loves her. But more to the point, he also points out that while he's no doubt started to earn his good graces with Jim, and Jim admits that he doesn't really see Strickler as an enemy much anymore, although he does point out that he's done some things that he shouldn't be proud of. Strickler points out that even if he's earned his keep with Jim, his troll friends aren't necessarily going to, return that sentiment. They are very much gunning for Strickler's head. They want to kill him simply because he's an agent of Gunmar, or was an agent of Gunmar. Not necessarily anymore. He's been excommunicated from the Janus Order. He's now on the run from a troll assassin he resurrected to try and claim his own power. He's trying to make up for all of that, but he's trying to kind of earn his good graces with Jim because he doesn't have that anymore, and also is trying to make up for the fact that he was a thorn in Jim's side for the longest time. But of course, the trolls haven't really been around for any of that, so of course they don't fully understand that Strickler is trying to be a good guy now. They just see him as this evil agent, as this evil changeling who has never really proved himself redeemed. And after hearing all of that, Jim does admit that does give Strickler his word that regardless of what happens, he will not let any of his troll friends hurt him. And of course Strickler does thank him and goes to shake his hand, but then Jim remembers that he's wearing daylight and accidentally injures him, so he summons his armor and takes his hand. And of course Strickler responds that Jim has given him a lot to think about. But in any case. While that's happening, Toby and Claire are currently being grilled out by Coach Lawrence and Miss Janeth, and they are very confused as to what exactly the little stick thing that Claire has is, and of course admits that they need to, and of course they're trying to figure out how much trouble that the two of them are in, And of course, Claire whispers to Toby that they need to figure out a way to get the staff back so that they can get the spell to Jim so that they can save his mother. But and of course it's at this point where Toby points out that he did have an ace in the hole that he was saving for swimming class, but admits that saving Jim's mother is probably more important. At which point he proceeds to fake an asthma attack. And not very well, might I mention. It's very obviously played up for effect, but and of course Coach Lawrence even admits that he seems like he's faking. But of course Claire proceeds to tell the two of them that they are, that the thing is his rescue inhaler, and that's it, and that they need it to save him from his asthma attack. And of course Coach Lawrence doesn't buy a word of it, but Miss Janeth, this is admittedly a little bit creepy. But Miss Janeth immediately jumps at the opportunity to give one of her students CPR, and immediately gives him rescue breaths, and only rescue breaths. It's a little bit of a creepy scene. I'll admit that. Miss Janeth might be, well, I'm just gonna leave that up to your interpretation. But Miss Janeth, let's just say it's implied that Miss Janeth is doing more than CPR. Let's just say that. But in any case, after Miss Janeth gives him quote unquote CPR. Claire is very insistent that they get the shadow, that he gives him the shadow steps so that she can give him his inhaler. And of course when Coach Lawrence does give it back, at which point Miss Janeth stops giving Toby CPR, it means that she's always wanted to do that, and then proceeds to wipe her lips. Again, leave that up to your interpretation. I'll get into that. It's just, let's just leave that at that. But of course, with that, they then proceed to go back to the dance and leave them on their own. At which point they then proceed to pick themselves back up and proceeds to climb onto the roof where nobody can see them, so that they can start summoning a portal to get out of there. And of course, Toby tells Claire to hurry up and concentrate, and she admits that she is, but also points out that he needs to shut up because it's not helping. And at which point she starts getting ready to summon a portal, but then Toby sees Angor Rot appear on the roof and proceeds to warn Claire about it. And Claire initially thinks that he's just trying to distract her again, but then he tells her that Angor Rot is there, and she proceeds to turn around, and sure enough, first and foremost, he proceeds to refer to the Shadow Staff as the Scath Room, which seems to be its official name, which is in fact its official name. That's what it's called. They haven't been calling it the Scath Room this entire time. They've just been referring to it as the Shadow Staff, because they didn't actually know the name, and now they do. Of course, this is this point where Angor Rot tells them that he finds it amusing that a mere human can possibly think they have the mental capacity to wield the Shadow Staff. or Scathrun as he keeps calling it, but and proceeds to chase after him and attack them. And Toby, of course, can't bring his Warhammer with, so he's unfortunately unable to help Claire face off against Angor Rot. Because I should mention, Toby's hammer does eventually get compact mode, but that isn't for a while yet. So he doesn't have the ability to carry his Shadow Staff around with him. Unfortunately not. But of course that means Claire's alone by herself, being forced to fight Angor Rot on his own. And Angor Rot is insistent that he get the key to Troll Market and he'll let her live. But she continues to face off against him and tells him that he's never going to give her the key to Troll Market. At which point he points out that no mere man that it's a bit of an insult that she thinks mere man can wield the Shadow Staff. But she tells him that she's no man, and proceeds to continue to face off against him. And Toby eventually realizes he needs to do something to help Claire out. And then spies a loose pile of bricks on the side of the roof and starts chucking them at Angor Rot's head. Which, of course, Angor Rot doesn't really faze Angor Rot, let alone do anything to him. But he admits that when he's done with the girl, he'll deal with him later. But she then proceeds to kick him in the balls and invoke rule number 3, and then proceeds to run off. And they continue to climb further up onto the roof to get as far away from Angor Rot as possible so they can summon a Shadow Staff and summon a Shadow Portal. And eventually, Claire is successful at summoning one, and is about to get ready to leap through it. But then Angor Rot appears and snatches the story with the spell away from Toby and Claire. And then proceeds to gloat, telling them that they tried so hard to help their fellow troll hunter, to help their precious troll hunter, but now that the spell is his and that they're never going to be able to use it. And he admit that they'll fail and that they'll never be warriors. And of course Claire then proceeds to respond that she may not be a warrior, but she did learn javelin on track and field, and then proceeds to use the Scathrun to send the spell through the portal and snatched it out of Angor Rot's hands. And of course, by this point, Jim is worrying because Toby and Claire haven't come back yet officially, and he's a little confused and he's a little concerned as to how exactly it is they've actually managed to, get back and what's taking them so long. And of course, he then proceeds to find out that they seem to have been engaged with priorly, and the Shadow Staff just proceeds to appear through the portal. And Vendel is just happy to have it. He just takes the Shadow Staff off and proceeds to get ready to read the spell, while Blanket points out that they should just rest their graces that they were able to get them the spell at all. But of course, eventually Vendel starts reading through the spell and realizes that there's another complication. At which point we can then cut back to the fight with Angor Rot, and he proceeds to push Toby and Claire off the roof because they now no longer have a weapon to defend themselves. And he grabs Claire's purse and is about to push the two of them off the roof. But then he gets a look inside of Claire's purse and realizes that her horngazzle is inside. And rather than kill them, he decides to cut the straps on her purse and then just leaves. And this causes Toby and Claire to fall off the roof. They barely make it to the ground safely because they both get snagged on the spring fling banner as well as a tree. And although Claire is visibly confused as to why he would just take their bag and run, but at this point where Coach Lawrence shows up. And now realizing that they can't be trusted and supervised, and proceeds to send them back to the gym, even though they were never, at the gym. At which point they start thinking through some things, and that's about all we learn. But in any case, they return back to the gym, and they start thinking through some things, with Claire clearly being puzzled as to why Angor Rot just took her bag. But of course they're at the gym. But of course they're currently at the gym and at the Spring Fling dance anyway. So they admit that and Toby decides to ask Claire to dance, admitting that while he may not be Jim, he can still dance. And of course Claire does decide to take Toby up on his offer because it's a very sweet offer of him to offer, but as a friend. But then they see the mole in a costume. and they see the mole mascot, and this is where we find out who the mole mascot actually is, I should mention. But of course, Claire points out that obviously he should go talk to her and dance with her. But Toby objects, pointing out that he doesn't really know who her is. But Claire tells him that that's what makes it romantic, and then proceeds to give him a gentle shove in the mole mascot's general direction. At which point, Toby very awkwardly asks her if they can dance, and the mole mascot doesn't really answer because obviously they're in costume. But the mole mascot does proceed to scoop up his hands and proceeds to dance with him. And of course, Toby is very awkward. He's trying to make small talk and failing miserably because it's very awkward. The whole scene is just very awkward. But and of course that's the whole point. But he then proceeds to decide to go for it, and then proceeds to tell the mole mascot that he's been trying to figure out who she is for the longest time, and admits that he may be in love with her. And the mole mascot just kind of looks at him with a seeming look of happiness on its face, because we can't really see its face. But it's at this point where the dance is interrupted to announce who the Spring King and Spring Queen are. And of course we find out, surprising literally everybody, that Steve Palchuk is the Spring King, which of course nobody fully understands. And even when Senior Earl is reading the announcement, he looks at the card and is confused as to how Steve even won Spring King when he didn't win any of the challenges. And of course, Eli also expresses his disappointment, pointing out that he thought this was going to be the year of Eli. And of course, immediately, this scene is also very confusing because obviously, Eli should have won if you've been paying attention. He won all of the challenges that were seen on screen. So obviously, he should have won. He would have won Spring King, and he didn't. But also, something interesting I noticed with the scene that isn't really, that is only really clarified on later. But I did realize something. I did realize it going through the series a couple of times again. As I find out, Coach Lawrence has an interesting reaction in this scene, where when Steve comes up to celebrate and take his Spring King crown, Coach Lawrence beams at him. And considering what's revealed about the relationship later, it's implied that Coach Lawrence may have in fact rigged the whole Spring King election so that Steve would win. And the reason why isn't made clear yet, but the way Coach Lawrence reacts when Steve comes up on stage and happily accepts his crown is heavily implied there's something deeper going on there, and we will get to that. But of course, at this point where Senior Earl, after collecting himself from the confusion, then proceeds to tell everybody who the Spring Queen is, and that the Spring Queen is Darcy Scott, which and of course, everyone wonders if anybody's actually seen Darcy Scott and asks the audience and asks the other students if they've seen her. At which point, the mole mascot takes off its head and it's revealed to be Darcy inside. And this causes Toby to become visibly confused, and of course is also very surprised that it's Darcy inside the mascot. But and of course, Darcy then proceeds to tell him that being popular is hard work, and points out that this is the only real way she can be herself. Which he does find endearing, but he also points out that he asked her if she wanted to go, and she said no. But of course, so she points out that Toby asks everybody to the dance, literally any girl that he could find to the dance, and of course she pointed out that she wanted Toby to ask her for her, and not just because she was a girl. But also does admit that what he said was very sweet. And does offer for him to be her duke, which he gladly accepts and proceeds to take her hand. And this is adorable because now, from this point onward, they become a couple, which is great. But it's cute. It's cute that Darcy and Toby do become a couple. It's a very adorable thing. It's a very adorable thing that just spontaneously happens in this episode. But it does wind up becoming a recurring thing for the rest of the franchise, and I find that very adorable. But in any case, the scene then proceeds to cut back to Vendel and Troll Market, where he proceeds to tell Jim what the other complication is, and that in order to undo the binding spell, So Claire would obviously would fix. It would help. Jim. It would help. What is it? It would help Barbara finally recover from her quote unquote wounds. But also points out that in the process she will likely lose her memory and not remember any of the things that Jim just told her about his double life as a troll hunter. Which that's what I was talking about. She loses her memories and and for the short term, doesn't really remember any of what happened in Troll Market or with Strickler or anything else. But in any case, it's at this point where she does point out where she does to give them a moment to say goodbye to each other. At which point, Jim and Barbara have one last moment where Jim tells Barbara that he's so sorry and that he wished he told her earlier. But she also proceeds to tell him back that she does have something important to tell him, that before he became the Troll Hunter, before any of that, she always knew that he was going to be he knew that she was always going to be a hero. He was always going to be a hero because he was always her hero, and calls him her brave little boy. At which point they proceed to have one last hug. At which point Vendel proceeds to walk up with a strange gemstone thing and proceeds to tell her and Strickler to place their hand on them. And Strickler tries to also have one last moment with Barbara, but Barbara obviously feels very betrayed by Strickler at this point because she didn't really know him all that well. And also, he lied to her as well about being a changeling, and also put a binding spell on her without her knowledge or consent. So obviously, she doesn't really trust Strickler anymore, and then proceeds to tell him that she's not really going to miss him when he forgets her, and that she's looking forward to it, which causes him to become very, very sad and heartbroken because she had actually genuinely developed feelings for Barbara, and now he's completely betrayed her trust. But in any case, it's at this point where Vendel proceeds to have them both place their hands on the gemstone and proceeds to start chanting, which and of course he proceeds to start chanting the spell, which of course starts to cause the pain energy to flow out of Barbara and into Strickler, which signifies that they're undoing the binding enchantment. But of course it is at this point where of course Strickler proceeds to cry out in pain because all the pain he's inflicted on Barbara is being fed back into him, and Jim does sympathize with Strickler in this scene. He sees Strickler in great pain, and all he can see, and he looks at him, this man who has done nothing but hurt him, and at this point, and looks at him with complete sadness, and realizes that not even Strickler deserves that. And yeah, that's how that scene ends. But in any case, after all of that, Jim proceeds to bring Barbara back to a human hospital now that she's officially recovered and no longer in any sort of grave pain. He then proceeds to bring her to the human hospital and tells her that she'll be safe there, and then proceeds to leave to go pick up Claire and Toby. Before he leaves, Barbara proceeds to wake up and asks him what happened, and of course, Jim immediately proceeds to pull out his amulet because he reveals that he's very much willing to tell her in the scene. He goes up to her to tell her what exactly is going to tell her everything and what happened to her and why she's in the hospital, but he can't bring himself to do it. He looks into her eyes. His mom tells him that regardless of what's going on, that he can tell her anything, and he realizes he can't put her through that pain again. He can't put her through the pain of knowledge of knowing that her baby boy is this troll hunter dude, and so he lies and tells her that she was in some sort of accident, hit her head, and is now suffering from amnesia, but she'll be fine. Which of course causes her to be happy, but it is a false happiness because obviously Jim promised that he would tell. He realizes that he promises Barbara that he was going to tell her. I should mention that, but he promises that he was going to tell her, and then he doesn't. Because he doesn't want her to go through all the pain of knowing again. So he doesn't tell her. At which point, he leaves to go to the Spring Fling dance. And of course, Toby's nowhere in sight because he's currently dancing with Dorsey inside. But he does see Claire sitting on the side of the road. And And she does tell him, and she does ask him if his mom is fine, and he admits that she will be. She'll take her a bit, but she will eventually be fine. But also admits that she did lose her memory, so that is going to be a thing for a while. But then also proceeds to ask her why she's not inside, but she proceeds to point out that she didn't really feel like going into the spring fling anymore. But of course, Jim points out that it's fine, and pointing out that he didn't want their first dance to be in some sort of stupid gymnasium. So he decides to have her hop onto his Vespa, and proceeds to drive her off to the lookout point, where they first fought Angor Rot together. And of course, on the way there, they see all the beautiful sights she sees all the beautiful sights as they drive through Arcadia. And proceeds to rest her head on Jim's shoulder while they drive, and of course Jim is just kind of focusing on the road, but he does like the comfort of knowing that she's there. So he's happy that she's comfortable around him. At which point they proceed to drive up to the lookout point. At which point Jim proceeds to set up his speaker, and I forget the name of the song that they play. I think it's open on my computer. Yeah, it's called Eris 2. It's an actual song you can listen to, but yeah, the song Eris 2 is playing on a Bluetooth on Jim's phone, and he proceeds to pull her into a dance, and she proceeds to tell Jim that he is unfortunately that he unfortunately lost, and that Steve is unfortunately Spring King. Although Jim points out that he doesn't feel like a loser. At which point he proceeds to continue to dance with Claire, and very awkwardly tries to sing along with the song, but which of course she finds cute. But they proceed to just kind of dance a little bit and have a moment, and they are about to go in for a kiss when suddenly Claire finally realizes what Angor Rot was after, and Jim of course is confused because she thinks it's about him, but thinking that his breath stank or something, but. Of course, she then proceeds to tell him that actually it's something far worse, and that he has it. And of course, Jim eventually works out that she's talking about Angor Rot and wonders what he has. At which point, she points out that he has the key to Troll Market. And sure enough, we then see a shot of Angor Rot having finally found the horngazzle in Claire's purse, and then proceeds to hold it up, declaring that now nowhere is safe for Jim to hide. And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, that's where the season is going to end, with Angor Rot invading Troll Market. So yeah, it's a big thing. So first and foremost, this is the episode where Strickler officially reforms and officially becomes a good guy. But although the trolls don't fully buy it at first, because obviously he's a changeling. Obviously they're very wary around changelings. But of course this is the episode where Barbara proceeds to learn everything about Jim's double life, and then proceeds to forget all of it, because of the binding spell. But yeah, she does see a troll market for the first time. She learns about the truth about Jim's double life as the Trollhunter. She learns all of that, and then that gets blipped from her memory for a bit, until she eventually remembers, and eventually her memory gets jogged. That takes a bit of a while, but she does eventually remember she does eventually remember. It just takes a while for her to get there. But of course, this episode is where Darcy and Toby officially start to become a thing, which is cute. Obviously that was a big thread throughout the entirety of the second half of part 1, and technically season 2 because it's supposed to be season 2. But that's been a thread throughout the entirety of the second half of part 1, and it does finally come to a head. And now we can also finally talk about that thing from the episode Where's My Mind, where Darcy responds, "Don't ask," when asked what her worst fear is. We now know what that is. It was in fact the fear that she was going to be found out as the mole. And it wound up coming true, and it wound up not being a big deal. So yeah, that's a big thing. But yeah, this episode. But yeah, of course, this episode is just that's about that. Also, the scene with Miss Janet, still uncomfortable. I'll leave you that to your interpretation, but it is a little uncomfortable, and it's very weird. But yeah, in any case, yeah, that's essentially what the episode is. It's setting up the final episode of the season, And it's going to be leading, and that's eventually going to lead into part 3, which then leads into part 4, and then we can just continue onward with the series. But we're about halfway through at this point, and I'm very happy that we're halfway through at this point, because this is where the series starts to get interesting. I mean, obviously it was already interesting before, but it does this extended first season starts to kind of push into the actual world building a little bit more. So. Yeah, then the third season, and then the third and fourth season start building as well. But yeah, we're getting to that point. We're getting to the halfway point, and I'm excited to talk about some of the things from the latter half of the series with you guys, because revelations start to get interesting here. But in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of Trollhunters. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. Link is down in the description. Please go support me. Again, go check out my Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays. Please go check that out. Go check out my Discord again, because I want to connect with people over there. I would appreciate it if people were to connect with me over there. Go hang out. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked on the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!